A scream erupted from the back of the computer lab. Tara's eyes darted to her screen, her heart hammering in her chest. "No way! This can't be real," she muttered under her breath, her voice barely audible over the deafening silence that had suddenly fallen over the room. The words on her phone's screen made no sense. Subject, announcement, graduation, keynote speaker. She hit the email open, barely able to process what it was saying. A deep, hollow silence swept across the room as Tara's eyes scanned the lines, her lips parting in shock. "We are pleased to announce that the graduate student keynote speaker at this year's commencement ceremony will be Elena Santos, Masters in Education Policy, chosen for her extraordinary academic achievements and compelling personal journey." Tara's eyes locked on the name again. Elena Santos? The janitor? Her gaze flickered to the small, quiet figure she'd passed 1,000 times in the halls. The woman pushing a cleaning cart through the corridors of Westfield, invisible to all but the dust. The room erupted into chaos. Whispers turned into full-blown outrage, and confusion filled the air. "No way!" Tara whispered again, louder this time, her disbelief dripping with mockery. "The janitor? How is she giving the speech?" Connor, leaning over Tara's shoulder, read the email aloud with a smirk. "Are they serious? This has to be some kind of joke. The janitor. They're letting her speak at our graduation." A ripple of laughter spread across the room, but it was tinged with nervousness. As Tara continued to stare at the screen, the laughter grew louder, turning into sarcastic remarks. "Who's next? The guy who hands out the towels in the gym?" Jessica scoffed, crossing her arms. "I can't believe this. What is this? Some diversity stunt?" The word stung, but it wasn't just the students' disdain that filled the air. It was a sense of disbelief, as though they couldn't fathom how someone like her could ever rise to the level of giving a speech at their prestigious university. Tara swiped through the email, revealing Elena's academic credentials, her master's degree, her multiple degrees from the Philippines. She scrolled through Elena's achievements, none of which matched the image of the quiet woman who cleaned the university's halls. "She's been here for years, and she's a janitor?" Tara's voice trembled with contempt. A bitter silence fell as the full weight of the message sank in. The laughter stopped. No one knew how to process the unexpected shock of it, but for one brief moment, Elena Santos, the invisible woman, had taken center stage. Elena Santos pushed the old cleaning cart through the pristine hallways of Westfield University. The wheels squeaked as she maneuvered around scattered papers and abandoned coffee cups, her eyes downcast, her movements practiced and methodical. The students rushing past. She was just another face, just another invisible worker. The campus, an ivory tower of wealth and privilege, was built on the backs of people like Elena, people who cleaned, served, and maintained. They never noticed her, and most days she didn't mind. After all, Elena had learned long ago to disappear into the shadows of this world. But today felt different. As she turned the corner near Baker Hall, she noticed the group of senior students gathered in their usual spot, laughing, talking about thesis revisions and graduation plans. Designer. Handbags spilled out of their chairs, their expensive shoes carefully arranged under tables. They were the future of Westfield, the ones who had worked hard for their place. At least, that's what they told themselves. "Can you believe Professor Harrington is making us rewrite our entire thesis?" A young woman with a perfectly manicure complained loudly, her voice high-pitched with frustration. She glanced at her friend beside her, a casual sneer on her face. "What does he think, we don't have lives?" Her friend nodded in agreement, glancing at the floor and dropping a candy wrapper right at Elena's feet. It fluttered to the ground, landing inches from the trash can. Elena silently bent down to pick it up, wincing as the weight of her body pressed down on her knees. The repetitive motions of bending and straightening had long ago taken their toll. "Oh my God," a tall young man laughed as he adjusted his expensive watch. "She's like right there. Can we not talk about this now?" he said, his voice suddenly lowering in an attempt to avoid her hearing. The girl rolled her eyes. "Relax, Connor. It's not like she speaks enough English to understand us anyway." The words stung, But Eleanor had heard worse. Her life in America, built on 2 decades of cleaning, had been defined by this kind of quiet cruelty. A life of subjugation, built on being unseen and unheard, her every gesture shaped by the desire to stay invisible, to blend into the background and get through another day. Her English was perfect now, polished from years of university classes and late-night study sessions, but to them her accent and her job rendered her insignificant. But today was different. She could feel the weight of their eyes on her as she reached for the candy wrapper, as if she were nothing more than an object in the room, a mere accessory to the pristine, well-dressed university students that surrounded her. "Are you okay?" One of the students, a young woman with bright blonde hair, asked as Eleanor straightened. The condescending tone in her voice was almost enough to make Eleanor snap. But she didn't. Elena looked at the group of students, each one oblivious to the life she had built with blood, sweat, and sacrifice. They didn't know that her children, Marco and Leah, were the driving force behind her every decision. They didn't know about the 2 decades of work she had put in, all while studying in the shadows, keeping her 2 worlds separate, her job as a janitor and her academic life. The world of privilege that these students inhabited was as far from her own as the stars. As she wiped down the nearby study table, the silence in the air felt suffocating. The conversations around her continued, but they felt distant now. She could hear the muffled chatter of students debating thesis topics, complaining about the pressure of exams, talking about their parents' expectations for graduation. None of them had the slightest idea what it was like to carry the weight of 2 worlds on her shoulders. The moment felt too loud, too heavy, too clear. Her back, hunched with the years of cleaning, protested against the effort. She thought of her children, Marco, accepted to MIT, and Leah, about to finish medical school back in the Philippines. The money she sent home from her janitorial job had made that possible, yet none of the students would ever know that. A voice snapped her back into the present. The first girl, the one who had made the comment about rewriting her thesis, called out dismissively, "Can you do the table by the window too? It's like super dusty. We need to study there." Elena nodded silently, but inside, a storm was brewing. She had worked for this. She had fought for every inch of this education, all while cleaning up after the very people who had now become so arrogant and dismissive. Her hands gripped the cleaning cart tighter, her knuckles white from the pressure. As she wiped down the table by the window, she caught sight of the bulletin board on the far wall. A bright red flyer caught her attention. It read, "Graduation ceremony, 2 weeks away." She felt a tightness in her chest. Graduation. She had dreamed of this moment for years, but now it felt almost impossible. The world she had built, the janitor who would walk across the same stage as the privileged students she cleaned for, was about to come crashing down. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a message from Dr. Abery, the department chair. "Can you stop by my office this afternoon? Good news about your thesis." She smiled to herself, trying to suppress the wave of pride that bubbled up inside her. It had been a long, hard road to get here, and in 2 weeks it would finally pay off. But then the group of students, still oblivious to her existence, burst into laughter once more. The words echoed in her mind. "She's just the janitor." They would never understand. She gathered her things and quietly turned to leave, her heart pounding in her chest. There was a part of her that longed to stand up, to speak her truth, to expose the years of work and sacrifice that had gotten her to this point. But she didn't. Not yet. Elena's steps echoed through the nearly empty hallway of the student center, the bright fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Her eyes flicked to the floor as she pushed her cleaning cart past the rows of vending machines, past the glass-walled offices, past the students who rarely noticed her. It was almost the end of her shift, and soon she would be heading home to her tiny apartment, where her children waited for her stories of perseverance. But today, something in the air felt different, heavier, as Elena rounded the corner near the lounge area. She froze. Voices, laughter, disdain. She lingered half-hidden behind a row of lockers, but her curiosity, her desire to know, compelled her to stay. She listened, every nerve on edge, as the voices she'd come to recognize as belonging to the seniors began to rise in volume. Tara, Jessica, and Connor were among them. "No, seriously," Tara said with an exaggerated laugh. "They're really letting her speak at graduation. The janitor. God, it's a joke." Her voice dripped with disbelief and scorn. "What does she even know about anything besides cleaning bathrooms and wiping down tables?" Elena's chest tightened as she heard the familiar crackling of mockery in the air. She bit her lip, forcing herself to stay hidden, to avoid confrontation, but the conversation continued, cutting through her like shards of glass. "I heard she doesn't even speak good English," Connor added dismissively, his laughter echoing. "In the hallway. I bet she didn't even write her own papers. It's got to be some diversity stunt. You know, the whole 'look how inclusive we are' thing. We paid full tuition for a reason. This is ridiculous." "Totally," Jessica chimed in, her tone flat with contempt. "I mean, I'd be embarrassed. What's next, having the janitor hand out our diplomas?" Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. Each word cut deeper than she could have ever anticipated. She had known, of course, that her appearance as the keynote speaker would stir controversy, but hearing it out loud, hearing their laughter, their assumptions, their judgment, was an entirely different kind of betrayal. She stood frozen for a moment, the weight of their words heavy on her chest. Her entire life had been spent avoiding the spotlight, quietly doing the work that no one else would. But now, with this graduation looming, all the years of sacrifice, of silence, of keeping her head down, it felt like it had all been for nothing. All she had worked for was being dismissed by the very people who would walk across that stage with their heads held high. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, jolting her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Dr. Avery, the department chair. "Can you stop by my office this afternoon? There's something important we need to discuss regarding your graduation speech." She could feel the tension building in her chest, tightening her breath. She pushed the cart forward, forcing herself to leave the lounge area and escape the echoes of their cruelty. She kept her head down, but the sting of the words followed her as she exited the building, the weight of their laughter still hanging in the air. Later that afternoon, in Dr. Avery's office, Elena sat in a stiff, uncomfortable chair across from the department chair's polished desk, her heart racing. The air was thick with unspoken words as Dr. Avery glanced at his computer screen, avoiding her eyes. "Elena," he began, his voice laced with a forced calm, "I've received a number of calls from concerned parents, students' parents. They're upset. Some are questioning your role as the keynote speaker. They feel it's inappropriate for a member of the maintenance staff to give a speech at graduation." Elena's breath caught in her throat, the sting of their words. In the lounge now being echoed in the administration's cold, businesslike tones. The injustice was palpable, but she fought to keep her composure, pushing down the surge of anger and shame that threatened to boil over. "I was selected for my academic achievements," Eleanor said, her voice steady, but the words felt like a struggle. "Not my employment." "I know," Dr. Avery replied, his gaze briefly meeting hers before he looked back at the screen, clearly uncomfortable. "But, well, the administration is feeling pressure. Some of the major donors, Connor's father especially, have expressed their concerns. You're, well, disrupting the university's social order." Elena clenched her fists, trying not to show the hurt that lanced through her chest. The work that had sustained her family, that had made her education possible, was now being used against her. "Are you rescinding my invitation to speak?" Elena asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. The words were out before she could stop them, and the rawness of the question hit her harder than she expected. "No, no," Dr. Avery quickly responded, shaking his head. "The invitation stands, but they've suggested that you take a leave of absence, you know, until after graduation. Less visibility. They want to minimize the optics. The fact that a janitor is delivering the keynote speech. Elena stared at him, her mind racing. The offer of leave, of a paid break, was an insult. It was clear they didn't want her to exist in the same space as the students, didn't want her to be seen in the context of their graduation ceremony. They wanted to hide her away, to make her disappear until the day was over. "I need the hours," Elena said firmly, her voice unwavering despite the cold fire spreading in her chest. "My children are coming. I can't afford to miss work. The ceremony is 2 weeks away. I'm not disappearing." Dr. Avery sighed, rubbing his hand over his balding head in exasperation. "I understand. I'll tell them you'll be reassigned to the administrative buildings. Less student contact." "It's all about perception, Elena. Perception." The word echoed in her mind as she stood to leave. She wanted to say so much more, to scream at him, to expose everything, but instead she nodded and thanked him, her voice as cold as the glass. Walls around them. She knew the truth now. Her presence, her very existence as a janitor, was an embarrassment. As Elena left the office, the campus felt colder, the weight of the world pressing down harder. She walked back to her shift with a sense of finality in her steps, each one more resolute than the last. But something had changed. She no longer wanted to be invisible. She had spent years keeping her two worlds apart, the world of the maintenance staff and the world of academia. But now, as the graduation ceremony loomed closer, the lines between those worlds were starting to blur. The hallway felt narrower than usual as Elena pushed her cleaning cart down the corridor. The usual hum of students and the clatter of hurried footsteps had faded into the background, replaced by an oppressive silence that seemed to hang around her. She could feel their eyes on her. They weren't just glances anymore. It was as if their stares pierced through her, made her visible in ways she had spent so long avoiding. She pushed the cart harder, her knuckles whitening against the handle, but no matter how fast she moved, the whispers followed. "I can't believe it," a voice drifted from a nearby study lounge. "A janitor, speaking at our graduation, can you imagine?" Elena's steps faltered for the briefest moment, the words cutting through her like shards of glass. She knew it was happening. She had heard it, felt it coming, but hearing it out, loud, from the very people she had quietly worked for, made it worse. "They're just doing this for diversity points. Like I'm supposed to be inspired by someone cleaning toilets," another voice added, dripping with disdain. She didn't have to look to know who it was. Connor, Tara, Jessica, the usual suspects. They had been a part of her world for years, though never in the way they imagined. She had kept her distance, kept her secrets, her pride hidden behind her work clothes and her quiet dignity. But now, her life was unraveling, thread by painful thread right before their eyes. Elena walked faster, heart pounding in her chest, but the weight of the moment sank deeper with every passing second. It wasn't just about the speech anymore. It was about her very existence, her worth being called into question. All the years of keeping her head down, of sacrificing, of hiding in the shadows, they were now the very things that made her a spectacle, a joke. Later that evening, the sound of her phone buzzing jolted Elena from her thoughts as she sat in the small break room of the maintenance office. The fluorescent light flickered overhead as she stared at the glowing screen. "Mom, are you okay?" Leah's message blinked back at her. Eleanor's heart clenched as she read the words, her daughter's worry echoing across the miles. "I saw the post online, the graduation thing. Mom, are you sure you're okay?" Eleanor swallowed hard, blinking away the sudden rush of tears. Her fingers hovered over the screen, unsure of what to say. How could she explain this to Leah? How could she explain that she was being mocked, that her achievements were being reduced to a diversity stunt? Her phone buzzed again, this time from Marco. "Mom, I'm proud of you. Don't let them make you feel small." The words stung, but in a different way. Marco was proud of her. He knew the sacrifices she had made, the long nights spent studying while cleaning, the sacrifices she had made to give him a chance at a better future. The problem wasn't her children. It was the world that had never seen her as more than what she did for a living. Her fingers trembled as she typed back, her words carefully chosen. I'm fine, Leah. Don't worry. I've been through worse. But inside, it felt like her. World was shattering. These moments, these small exchanges with her children were the only thing that kept her grounded. They were the reason she had worked so hard, the reason she had kept fighting. The thought that they might see her the way these students saw her, it felt like the weight of everything she had endured for the past 20 years was unraveling. Elena stood at the bus stop, a young woman in her 20s, with dreams bigger than the cramped streets she walked every day. She had just received her acceptance letter to the University of the Philippines, a moment that should have felt like triumph, but instead it felt like a promise that would be almost impossible to keep. She was supposed to go to school. She was supposed to become something more, but that dream collided with reality. The death of her father, the pressure of caring for her mother and younger brother, and the relentless need to survive brought her to America. There, she worked any job she could find, first as a dishwasher, then a cleaner, and slowly built a life, all while sending money back to her family. She thought of the night she had sat at her small kitchen table, a book open in front of her, while Marco, only a child at the time, sat next to her, asking questions about his homework. "Mom," Marco had asked, "when will you be a doctor like the ones you talk about?" Elena's heart had broken in that moment. She had wanted to tell him that she would be. She had wanted to say that one day she would be someone who mattered. But instead, she had held him close, whispering softly, "One day, my love, one day. You will see." Elena closed her eyes, the weight of the flashback overwhelming her. "One day," she whispered to herself. But today was not that day. Today, she was nothing more than a cleaning lady to them. Her phone buzzed again, snapping her out of the memory. It was a social media notification. She hesitated, knowing what she would find. It was a post, a photo of her name on the graduation list, the email announcing her as the keynote speaker. Beneath it, the comments were pouring in. "Who is this? Janitor giving the speech?" one comment read. "This is an embarrassment," another said, her hands clenched into fists. The comments kept coming, mocking, belittling, and all of them unaware of the person they were attacking. Elena, the woman who had worked tirelessly to prove she belonged, to build something better for her children, was now reduced to a name. On a list, a joke, a deep breath. Elena set her phone down, closing her eyes for a moment. The hum of the fluorescent light was louder now, the silence of the room pressing in. She thought of Marco's words. "Don't let them make you feel small." The pain of it all, of the years of hiding, of not being seen for what she truly was, of always having to work harder than anyone else to earn even a moment of recognition, pushed her to the edge. But somewhere, deep inside, something sparked. She would not let them define her. The next day, Elena stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the collar of her maintenance uniform, the same one she had worn for the last 20 years. The reflection staring back at her was the same, but she wasn't the same anymore, not after yesterday. The phone call from Dr. Avery still echoed in her mind. "I'll stand by you," he had said. But it was more than that now. It wasn't just about the speech. It wasn't just about graduation. It was about her right to exist in this space, her right to be seen, not as a cleaner, not as someone who served, but as a human being with her own dreams and ambitions. "You will see," she whispered to her reflection. "You will see me." The air was thick with tension as Elena wheeled her cleaning cart through the narrow hallways of Westfield University. The chatter and laughter from students filled the space around her, but today the noise felt different, louder, more invasive. The whispers seemed to follow her, to cling to her like a second skin. As Eleanor passed by the cafe near the student lounge, she overheard the familiar voices again. Tara, Jessica, Connor. Their words echoed in her ears, just like they had the day before, and the day before that. The mocking tone, the laughter, it was all there, aimed at her once more. "Did you see that Elena's the one giving the commencement speech?" "Unbelievable!" Tara's voice cut through the air, sharper than the others. "I still can't get over it. They're really letting the janitor talk at our graduation," Connor added, a low chuckle escaping him. "It's some kind of diversity stunt, right? How else could she have gotten in here?" Elena's heart sank as she heard the words, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. She kept walking, her hands gripping the car tightly, as if it were the only thing that kept her from crumbling. But then she caught a phrase that stopped her dead in her tracks. What if she didn't write her thesis herself? Jessica's voice was softer now, but Elena could hear the venom in it. My dad literally pays for the whole new wing. I don't even know how she passed. They didn't know. They had no idea who she really was. They saw only the uniform she wore, the job she did. But Elena wasn't just a janitor. She wasn't just someone who cleaned the floors and emptied trash cans. And somehow, as those words lingered in her ears, she realized that it was time for them to know. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, the sudden vibration snapping her back to reality. She pulled it out, her hands trembling as she saw a notification from the university's online portal. The headline in the email read, "Westfield's Invisible Scholar, Elena Santos's Journey from Janitor to Graduate Keynote Speaker." The words danced in her vision, her eyes narrowing as she read the subject, line over and over again. A journalist from the campus paper had written a profile about her. She was about to swipe the notification away when something caught her eye. A comment. Wait. This is Elena Santos, the janitor who's always cleaning. She's got 3 degrees from the Philippines and was valedictorian. A chill ran down Elena's spine. The comment wasn't just from some random student. It was from Tara, the same voice that had mocked her just moments ago. Elena's breath caught in her throat. The story was getting out, her story. Later that day, the media frenzy had already begun. The students she had passed in the hallways now recognized her everywhere. The whispers followed her like a cloud, and she could feel the weight of their eyes as she worked. She had been invisible for so long, but now the veil was ripped away, and she was exposed. For the first time in 2 decades, she wasn't just the woman who cleaned. She was the woman, the one they had overlooked, the one they had judged. "Did you see that article about Elena Santos?" A voice behind her asked. Elena felt her heart race. She had been standing at the end of the hallway, wiping down the glass windows, when she heard the voice, a voice she recognized. It was Connor. "I don't get it," he continued, his tone sounding uncertain, almost guilty. "She has 3 degrees. She was top of her class in the Philippines. Why didn't she ever say anything?" Elena didn't respond. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks as the realization hit. The story was no longer just about her being the janitor. It had become something else, something far bigger. She was no longer invisible. She had become a symbol of everything they didn't understand. Later that evening, Eleanor sat alone in her small apartment. Her phone had been buzzing, non-stop all day, with messages from Dr. Abbery, from her children, from reporters. But she couldn't bear to look at them. Not now. She couldn't deal with the questions, the demands for interviews, the constant attention. But one text from Leah, her daughter, stood out. "Mom, I'm so proud of you. I saw the article. Don't let them make you feel small. You are so much more than what they see." Elena's hand trembled as she read the message, and for a brief moment she allowed herself to close her eyes. She thought of her children, Marco, Leah, all the sacrifices she had made to give them better lives. And now they were proud of her, proud of what she had become. But there was a bitter taste in her mouth. The road to this moment had been long, and she had fought for everything. She had been silent, invisible, and now the world was watching. But was it for the right reasons? Elena set her phone down on the table, taking a deep breath. She had made it. But she was not going to let them define her. Elena arrived early for her shift, her body moving on autopilot as she cleaned the same areas, wiped down the same desks. But the students, they noticed her now. They stared. They whispered. They whispered more loudly than ever before, as if they could finally see her. "Did you hear? Elena Santos is speaking at graduation. She's going to be the keynote," one student exclaimed, her voice filled with disbelief. "Yeah, but she's just a janitor, right? How can she be a scholar?" another added, a sneer creeping into their tone. Must be a scam. Elena didn't flinch. She didn't show them the pain. She didn't let them see how deeply their words affected her. She couldn't. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Leah. "Mom, you've come so far. Don't let them change who you are. I know they're talking, but you've always been." Enough. Elena sat down in the janitor's closet, her heart pounding. She thought of Leah. She thought of Marco. She had to do this. She had to stand in front of them. She had to show them who she was. Not just a janitor, not just a mother, but someone who had worked tirelessly for every inch of her success. Connor, who had once laughed at Elena, now sat staring at his phone, his fingers nervously tapping the screen. He was reading the article again, the one that had blown up across the university's social media. It had gone viral, The Invisible Scholar, and it was picking up momentum. "What the hell?" Connor muttered. "I thought she was just the janitor. She was valedictorian. She had 3 degrees. His friends were quiet now, all of them absorbed in the story, the weight of Elena's unexpected journey sinking in. "She's incredible," one of them finally said, breaking the silence. "She did all that and we never even noticed." Connor swallowed, his face a mixture of shame and confusion. "We never noticed." The words lingered between them, heavy with the realization of their ignorance. The media pressure was mounting, the articles and comments flooding in. But Elena knew one thing for sure. She was no longer the janitor. She was Elena Santos, a woman who had worked against the odds, a woman who had fought for everything, and she would not let them define her. The quiet hum of the university campus seemed to be turning into a constant roar for Eleanor. The buzzing fluorescent lights in the maintenance office felt louder today, and her hands shook as she cleaned the window outside Dr. Avery's office, looking in through the glass. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, charged with a gravity that Eleanor hadn't yet fully understood. She could feel it, though. The air seemed thicker, more oppressive. Her phone buzzed, jolting her from her thoughts. It was a text from Mr. Perkins, her supervisor. "Elena, can you meet me in my office ASAP? Important." A chill ran down her spine. Her heart began to race as she wiped her hands on the sides of her uniform, a futile attempt to calm herself. She had been dreading this moment, the moment the conversation about her graduation speech became more than just whispers. She took a deep breath and headed toward Mr. Perkins's office, her shoes clicking softly on the floor. She could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on her. It was strange. She had walked these halls for years, barely noticed, but now every step felt like a spotlight. As she entered Mr. Perkins' office, he was standing by the window, his face tight, eyes focused on something outside. His usual warm smile was nowhere to be found. "Sit down, Eleanor," he said, his voice unusually low. Elena hesitated, then took the seat across from his desk. Her mind was racing. She could tell something was wrong, something more than the usual complaints about cleaning or her work schedule. "Is this about the speech?" she asked, her voice calm despite the storm swirling inside her. Mr. Perkins nodded, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Yes, but not just that." He took a deep breath, sitting across from her. "There's been some backlash. Some of the more significant donors have called, expressing their concerns. They're threatening to pull out their funding for the next academic year unless the situation is handled." Elena's stomach dropped. The words hung in the air, thick with implication. She knew who those donors were. The families of students like Connor, wealthy, influential, with ties that stretch deep into the university's administration. They want the speech cancelled, Elena. They think it's inappropriate for someone from your position, someone working as a janitor, to address the graduating class. Elena's mind spun. She had known it wouldn't be easy. She had expected some resistance, but this was different. These were the people whose contributions helped keep the lights on, whose money ensured the university's place among the prestigious elite. She had always known there was an unspoken line between people like her and the students at Westfield, but this was a whole new level. "And what does the administration want to do about it?" she asked, the words coming out sharper than she intended. Mr. Perkins avoided her gaze, clearly uncomfortable. They're pressuring me to tell you to step down. Take a leave of absence for the next few weeks. Hide your position, so to speak. Avoid further damage to the university's image. Elena sat there in stunned silence. She could feel the weight of it pressing against her chest, suffocating her. You know that's not going to happen, she said finally, her voice firm, though her hands were clenched tightly in her lap. I can't just disappear. I've worked my whole life to be here. I'm not backing down now. I know, Mr. Perkins said, his voice soft. I don't like it either, Elena. But you have to understand the position the school is in. It's about optics, about keeping donors happy. He paused, his eyes meeting hers briefly. But I'm doing everything I can. I'll stand by you. Just don't make any waves for now. Let me handle it. I don't want them to pull the funding. Elena felt a burst of anger. Optics. She had spent years making herself invisible just so she could be a part of this world. She had hidden her sacrifices, her hardships, her entire identity behind the janitor's uniform. But now, the very thing that had helped her survive, the thing that had kept her in this place, was the very thing that would erase her. I don't want to hide anymore, Elena said quietly, her voice resolute. I've worked too hard for this. I don't want to be ashamed of my job. I don't want to pretend I'm not the person I am. I understand, Mr. Perkins replied, his voice tight with empathy. But you have to know, it's not just about you. It's about everyone else who works here. It's not just your fight anymore. It's the school's reputation on the line. Eleanor felt the anger simmer beneath the surface. She was being told to shrink, to become small again, to put on the mask she had worn for so long. Don't worry, I'll take care of it, Mr. Perkins added. But you have to lay low. Let me talk to them, please. It's only for a few more weeks. After that, it'll be over. Elena nodded slowly, but inside, the fire burned hotter. Over? This wasn't just going to be over. It was going to change everything. The next morning, Elena walked the campus with a sense of unease. The whispers were louder now, thicker in the air, as if the students were no longer just gossiping. They were watching. She felt the weight of their eyes on her, the stares following her every step, as if they were measuring her up, wondering how she had slipped through the cracks and made it this far. As she passed by a student cluster near the student lounge, one of them spoke loudly, just loud enough for her to hear. Did you hear? The donors are pulling out if the janitor doesn't cancel her speech. It's so embarrassing, another voice added. Maybe she doesn't even deserve to speak. She didn't even go to school here. Why is she taking up space? Eleanor stopped, feeling a tightening in her chest. This wasn't just about a speech anymore. It was about everything she had fought for, the sacrifice, the long hours, the humiliation of constantly being seen as nothing more than an invisible servant. They were trying to erase her. Her hands tightened on her cleaning cart as she wheeled it forward, but there was no longer any avoiding it. She'd become a symbol now, a symbol of classism, of injustice, and of all the invisible people who worked behind the scenes, making everything happen while the world moved on without a second thought. As she walked toward the administrative building, Elena steeled herself. She wasn't backing down. She had already been invisible for too long. She wouldn't hide anymore, not for anyone. The night was quiet, except for the soft hum of the fluorescent lights above Elena as she worked through her final shift. The campus had emptied out hours ago, the students scattered across their apartments, dorms, and homes, celebrating their last week of classes. But here, in the corners of Westfield University where few dared to tread, Eleanor was still cleaning, still invisible. Her cleaning cart squeaked against the floor as she pushed it through the quiet, empty hallways, her mind racing. The words from Mr. Perkins earlier that day echoed in her ears. Lay low, Elena. Keep your head down for a few more days, and let me handle it. But how could she? How could she hide when everything she had worked for, the sacrifices, the long nights, the relentless push to prove her worth, was finally within her reach? The text from her daughter Leah flashed through her mind. You are enough. I'm proud of you. You always were. Her daughter's words felt like a lifeline, pulling her back from the edge of doubt. Eleanor stopped in front of the janitor's closet, her hands gripping the cart's handle as she stared into the quiet hallway. Graduation, 2 days away. She could already picture the day, standing at the podium, facing a sea of students who had once mocked her. They would see her, really see her, for the first time. But it wasn't just about them. It was about her, too. It was about the woman who had hidden behind the uniform, who had spent years in silence, always in the background, never asking for recognition. But now she was stepping forward. She was going to speak, and they would listen. But how could she make them believe that she was more than what they thought, more than just the woman who cleaned? Hours later, after her shift ended, Elena walked alone through the empty campus. Her footsteps echoed in the night, the cool breeze tugging at her uniform. She headed toward the student lounge, the familiar space where, for years, she had wiped down tables and emptied trash. She paused outside the door, staring at the spot where she had once sat, exhausted, tears streaming down her face, wondering if it would all be worth it. 2 decades of cleaning, studying, raising her children, all of it buried behind a mask of exhaustion and silence. She remembered the nights she had spent scrubbing the bathroom floors, her body aching, her eyes heavy with the weight of her double life. She had promised herself that one day she would finish her degree, that one day she would show her children what it meant to fight for your dreams. But those dreams felt so far away, so impossible on those long nights. Now, everything was different. She was about to stand on that stage, the same one she had cleaned countless times. She was about to speak, not as the janitor, but as Elena Santos, a woman who had fought through every obstacle to get here. Her phone buzzed again, and she glanced at the screen. A text from Marco this time. "Mom, you're the reason I'm never afraid of a challenge. I hope you know that." Her heart swelled, and she let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. It was the first time in so long that she felt like she was enough. Enough for her children, enough for herself, enough to take the stage and show them who she really was. The next day, Elena stood before the mirror in her small apartment, adjusting her outfit for the ceremony. It was strange, standing in front of the mirror, seeing herself as she had never allowed herself to see. The woman in the mirror was different. She wasn't just the janitor anymore. She was a graduate, a keynote speaker, a mother, a survivor. The weight of the moment settled on her shoulders, heavy but proud. This was her moment. Her phone buzzed once more and she picked it up, already smiling. It was a message from Dr. Avery. "I'm so proud of you, Elena. The entire department is rooting for you. I know you'll be incredible." Elena swallowed, blinking away the tears that threatened to fall. Incredible. The word felt too big, too lofty. But it wasn't about being incredible anymore. It was about being seen, being heard. That afternoon, Eleanor returned to the university for her final preparations before the ceremony. The campus was filled with graduates and families, all rushing about, finalizing their plans for the big day. She walked past the student lounge, her heart heavy as she caught glimpses of the same students who had once laughed behind her back. They were wearing their caps and gowns now, their smiles bright as they posed for pictures, talking about their futures. But Elena didn't stop. She didn't look back. She knew what she had to do. As she passed by the lounge, she overheard a conversation. A group of students was gathered by the windows, whispering and laughing. Eleanor paused, unsure whether to keep walking or stop. She recognized the voices. Tara, Connor, Jessica. They hadn't seen her yet, and Elena wasn't sure if she should approach them, but something tugged at her. This was the moment. "Did you hear about the janitor speaking at graduation?" Tara's voice was loud enough for Elena to catch the words. "I mean, come on, it's a joke, right? Like, why even bother? They're just doing it for diversity points." Elena clenched her fists, but she didn't stop walking. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, but she knew she couldn't back down now. Not anymore. Her pace quickened, and just before she turned the corner, she caught a glimpse of them looking at her, wide-eyed, shocked. The realization that she had overheard them hung heavy in the air. As she turned the corner, she kept walking, her steps firm, her head held high. She didn't need to respond. Not today. Tomorrow she would speak, and they would listen. Later. That evening, Elena sat alone in the student lounge, her final shift done. The chairs were empty now, but for a brief moment, the room felt familiar. The space where she had spent years cleaning, wiping down the tables, where she had overheard their laughter, their complaints, their judgment. Tomorrow, this room would be full of graduates, but she would no longer be invisible. Her co-workers, her friends, gathered around her, their smiles warm and proud. "We're so proud of you, Elena," one of them said. "You've earned this. Every step." Elena smiled, her eyes brimming with tears. She had earned it. And tomorrow, when she stood at that podium, she would show them all. She was more than just a janitor. She was Elena Santos, a scholar, a mother, and a woman who had refused to be invisible. Tomorrow they would see her. The auditorium was packed, buzzing with excitement, the air thick with anticipation. The rich velvet curtains behind the stage framed the sea of students, families, and faculty, each face a mixture of pride, expectation, and disbelief. The graduation ceremony was in full swing, and Elena stood backstage, staring at the polished surface of the podium she was about to address. Her hands trembled as she gripped the speech she had prepared. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing on her chest, but also a strange calm. This was it. For so long she had been invisible, the woman who cleaned the floors and wiped down tables, the woman who lived on the edges of this world, a shadow in the corridors of privilege. But today she would stand at the center of it all. Today they would see her for who she truly was. Today she would speak. Her thoughts drifted back to the journey that had led her here. The early morning shifts, the late-night study sessions, the exhaustion that threatened to break her every single day. She thought of Marco and Leah, her children, who had never once doubted her strength, who had always believed in her. She thought of her father's voice, his dream for her to make something of herself, to never stop fighting even when it seemed impossible. A soft knock on the door snapped her out of her reverie. Dr. Avery's voice came through, calm and steady. "It's time, Elena." Elena took a deep breath and stepped forward, her heart racing. The moment she had been dreading and anticipating was now before her. She walked toward the stage, the bright lights blinding her as she emerged from behind the curtain. The applause was immediate, but it was laced with confusion, curiosity, and skepticism. Elena took her place at the podium, her mind spinning for just a brief second. The applause died down, and a heavy silence fell over the room. She could feel the eyes of the audience on her, the eyes of the students who had once mocked her, the eyes of the parents who could not understand why someone like her was standing in front of them. Her hands shook as she adjusted the microphone, trying to steady herself. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words felt heavier than they ever had before. The weight of the expectations pressed against her chest. But this time, she wasn't going to hide. "Good afternoon," Elena's voice echoed through the microphone, a mixture of nerves and resolve in her tone. She paused, scanning the room, allowing the silence to stretch just a little longer. "I stand before you today, not as a janitor, but as a woman who has fought for her place in this world. A woman who has been invisible for far too long." A murmur rippled through the audience, the students exchanging glances, unsure of what to expect. But Elena didn't stop. She had come too far to turn back now. "For years, I've cleaned these halls. I've picked up your trash, washed your floors, and wiped down your tables. I've been invisible, fading into the background as you walked past me, too busy with your own lives to notice. But I've never been just the woman who cleans." She took a breath, feeling the weight of the moment pressing against her chest. "I am Elena Santos. I am a mother. I am a student. I am someone who has worked harder than most of you can imagine to get here." Elena's gaze shifted toward the back of the room, where Connor sat, his expression a mixture of disbelief and guilt. He'd never seen her for who she truly was. But that was about to change. I've spent my life fighting to be seen, not for glory, not for recognition, but because I believed, no, I know that I am worth it. I am worth more than just being someone's background character in their story. I've lived in the shadows, and I've worked tirelessly so that my children wouldn't have to. The words came faster now, her heart pounding in her chest as she spoke from the depths of her soul. I am the result of sacrifice. My father's sacrifice, my mother's sacrifice, the sacrifices of immigrants who come here to build a life for their families. And I am the result of my own sacrifice. I've worked every day of my life to make sure my children never have to struggle like I did. But I am not just a janitor. I am not just the invisible woman who sweeps your floors. I am someone who has earned her place here. She paused again, letting the weight of her words settle in the room. She could see the faces in the crowd. Some were starting to understand. Some were still skeptical. But she didn't care. This was her truth. This was her time. So, to those of you who have mocked me, to those of you who thought I didn't belong here, thank you. Because you've shown me what it means to fight for something, to prove myself when everyone else has already counted me out. I'm not standing here today because of pity or because of some diversity stunt. I'm standing here because I earned this. I fought for it. The silence in the auditorium was deafening. Elena could feel the eyes of the audience on her, the weight of their judgment. But there was no fear in her heart anymore. She had faced. Worse, she had faced her own doubts, her own fears, and she had come out the other side stronger for it. And to my children, Marco, Leah, I am here because of you. Every late night, every sacrifice, every tear, you are the reason I fight. You are the reason I stand here today. I did this for you. I did this so you would know that no dream is too big. No dream is impossible. Elena's voice broke for the first time, and a tear slid down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. She didn't care anymore. I am more than what they see. I'm more than just a janitor, and you too are more than what anyone tells you. You are enough. We are enough. The room was still, and then it happened. A slow clap started in the back of the room. It was hesitant at first, unsure, just one person. But then another joined in, and another. The sound grew, louder, more thunderous, until the entire auditorium erupted into applause. Elena stood there, her heart racing, her hands shaking as the applause washed over her like a tide. They saw her. Even Connor stood, his face a mixture of guilt and awe, his hands clapping slowly at first, then faster as the realization of her words hit him. Elena felt her knees weaken as the applause continued, but she didn't sit. She stood. Tall, her shoulders squared, her heart full. She had done it. She had made them see her. For the first time in her life, Elena wasn't invisible. She was seen. The ceremony was over. The applause had faded, the students and their families slowly trickling out of the auditorium, leaving the space quiet once more. Elena, still wearing her cap and gown, stood at the edge of the stage, gazing out over the empty seats. Her heart was still racing, the adrenaline of her speech slowly giving way to exhaustion. But it wasn't the kind of exhaustion that weighed her down with regret. It was the kind that came from having spoken her truth. For the first time she felt seen. For the first time she felt alive. But now, in the aftermath, there was something else hanging in the air, the feeling of not knowing what came next. She turned slowly, ready to leave the stage, when she saw him. Connor. He was standing a few feet away, just outside the shadow of the stage lights, looking almost like a stranger. The arrogant, dismissive student who had once laughed at her now stood with an air of uncertainty, his posture awkward, his face hesitant. The sight of him made Elena's chest tighten. She had expected this, the inevitable encounter, the apology, the attempt at redemption, but she hadn't expected it to come now at this moment. "Miss Santos," Connor said, his voice a little too formal, as if testing the waters. I wanted to talk." Elena raised an eyebrow, studying him. He looked different somehow, his usual confident demeanor replaced by a vulnerability she hadn't expected. She crossed her arms, waiting for him to continue, her emotions Still raw from her speech, I owe you an apology, Connor began, clearly uncomfortable. For everything I said, for everything I thought about you. Elena remained silent, but her gaze never left him. She wasn't sure what to make of this yet. This wasn't the Connor she had seen earlier. This wasn't the young man who had mocked her in the student lounge. There was a sincerity in his eyes now, a vulnerability she hadn't anticipated. I didn't know you, Ms. Santos, Connor continued, his voice quieter now. I didn't know what you had to do to get here. I didn't know who you really were. I just assumed. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. And that was wrong. Elena felt a pang of something she couldn't quite name. Regret? Sympathy? She didn't know. She wasn't sure if she wanted to forgive him. She didn't know if forgiveness was the right thing for her right now. He had been a part of the group that had dismissed her, that had looked down on her. And yet, here he was, standing before her, offering an apology she hadn't expected. I didn't realize just how much you've done, what it really takes, Connor said, his eyes falling to the floor for a moment. I'm ashamed. I was wrong. I wanted to apologize for mocking you, for not seeing you as you are. He hesitated, swallowing hard. I didn't realize until now how much you've sacrificed, how much you've worked for this. The words hung in the air. Elena's heart ached, but there was no malice in his voice, no defense, just genuine regret. For a long moment, Elena said nothing. She wanted to, needed to, tell him everything she had kept inside, the years of pain, of working 2 jobs, of sacrificing her life for her children's futures. She wanted to lash out at him, tell him everything about how he and others like him had dismissed her. But instead, she found herself speaking in a quieter tone than she had intended. Why now? She asked, her voice sharp but not angry. Why? Come to me now, after everything that's happened. Connor looked up at her, and for the first time, Elena saw a flicker of something that resembled real remorse in his eyes. I didn't know, he repeated, his voice cracking slightly. I didn't know that you were more than what I saw. My dad's been talking a lot lately about how much the university relies on donors like him, and how easy it is to just assume certain things about people. He paused, looking at her, and Eleanor could tell that he was trying to find the right words. And then, I heard you speak today, and it hit me. I was wrong about you, and I wanted to make it right, somehow. Elena wasn't sure what to make of his words. She had spent so many years assuming people like him would never understand, assuming they were too far removed from her reality to ever really see her. But now, in front of her, was this young man who had once ridiculed her, offering an apology. His guilt wasn't just for his words, it was for the assumptions he had made, the things he had taken for granted. There was something about the honesty in his voice that made her reconsider. Look, he said, his eyes meeting hers with determination. I can't undo what I said, but I can do something about it. My dad and we've started a scholarship fund in your name. I don't know if it'll make up for everything, but it's a start. Elena blinked, taken aback. She wasn't sure how to respond. A scholarship in her name? Connor must have noticed her stunned silence because he rushed to explain. It's for students who work part-time or full-time while they're here, who are juggling work and school like you did. My dad agreed to it. It's the least we could do. You've earned it. You deserve to be seen. The words landed like a blow to the chest, but this time the shock wasn't filled with anger or resentment. It was something else, a feeling of recognition, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to hope for. She hadn't expected redemption from him. She hadn't expected it from anyone, but here it was. Elena swallowed hard, her throat tight with emotion. You started a scholarship for me, she asked, barely above a whisper. Connor nodded, his expression earnest. For you, and for others like you. I know I can't fix everything with just this, but I want to try. Elena took a long, steadying breath, unsure of how to process it all. This was an apology she hadn't thought she would ever receive. You don't need to do this, Elena said, but even as the words left her mouth, she realized they weren't true. Not really. But I appreciate it. The air between Them felt lighter now, and Connor smiled, though there was still a shadow of regret in his eyes. "I'll keep working to make things right, Elena, I promise." Elena nodded, feeling the weight of the past year settle into her bones. She wasn't sure where this moment would lead, but she knew one thing for certain. This was a beginning. Not just for her, but for him too. As Connor walked away, Eleanor stood there for a long moment, watching him disappear into the crowd. She didn't know what the future would hold, but she felt something shift in her, something heavy and long. Overdue. She wasn't invisible anymore. The campus was quieter now, the energy of graduation fading into the warm, golden afternoon. Elena stood just outside the university's main building, her heart still racing from the whirlwind of the past few days. She had spoken her truth, and for the first time in her life she felt the weight of her journey, the years of sacrifice, the invisible battles fought in silence, finally being recognized. She clutched the folder in her hands, the official letter of offer for the research assistant position, a research assistant role. It still didn't quite feel real, like the words were just a dream she hadn't fully woken up from. But the letter was there, solid and real. The university had seen her, not as the janitor she had been, but as the academic she had always been beneath the surface. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a familiar voice. "Mom!" Eleanor turned around, her heart swelling with warmth. As she saw Marco and Leah running toward her, their faces beaming with pride. Marco was already in his cap and gown, the ceremonial outfit hanging loosely on his frame, while Leah was clutching a bouquet of flowers, her excitement palpable. Before Elena could say a word, both of her children enveloped her in a tight hug, their arms wrapping around her like an anchor. "You did it, Mom," Marco exclaimed, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of you." Leah pulled back slightly, her eyes shining with tears. "We always knew you could do it," she said, her voice soft but firm. Elena felt the knot in her throat tighten. This moment, this embrace, was the culmination of everything she had fought for. It wasn't about the speech, the recognition, or the scholarship. It was about them, Marco and Leah, her reasons for pushing through every barrier life had thrown at her. "I couldn't have done it without you," Elena whispered, her voice catching as she looked down at them. Her kids had been the fuel that kept her going, the reason she had never given up, no matter how hard it had gotten. The trio stood there for a moment, their arms around each other, the weight of the past week settling into a quiet, peaceful understanding. Eleanor didn't need to say anything else. The pride in her children's eyes spoke louder than any words could. Later, as the sun began to set and the campus emptied out, Elena made her way through the halls once more, the echo of her footsteps loud in the otherwise empty building. She passed the same rooms where she had once spent countless hours cleaning, the same hallways where she had once kept her head down, unseen and unnoticed. But now, as she walked through those very halls, it felt different. She felt different. The doors were open, the rooms full of new students, and Elena was no longer the woman pushing a cleaning cart. She wasn't just the woman who scrubbed the floors. She was a part of this world, an academic, a scholar, a mother. The building that had once felt like a prison now felt like a home where she had carved out a place for herself. Elena paused outside the door of a small seminar room, the weight of the research assistant role she had just been offered sinking in. This was her new beginning. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything she had endured, every sleepless night, every tear, every moment of doubt. But now there was nothing but pride. She had made it. She walked into the room with purpose, not as someone who had to be invisible anymore, but as someone who belonged. Have you ever been misjudged because of your status in life? The words hang in the air, charged with the weight of everything Elena has fought for, everything she's had to prove. In the quiet aftermath of her victory, there is a deep silence. The kind that comes after you've endured, risen, and finally been seen. The journey isn't just hers, it's all of ours. Every time we're dismissed, ignored, or underestimated because of our background, our job, our appearance, it's a wound we carry in silence, one that others may never even know exists. Elena's story is a reflection of that struggle. She didn't just speak for herself today, she spoke for everyone who's ever felt invisible. As the story of Elena's fight for recognition fades into the background, one question remains for us to answer. How many of us, at some point, have let our judgments of others blind us to their truth? Her words echo long after she's walked out of the spotlight, reminding us that we all have stories we've never told, battles fought in the shadows. Like, comment, and share if this story resonated with you. And stay tuned for more, because there are countless other stories waiting to be heard.